With the signing of the second major stimulus package at the close of 2020, the rules regarding the PPP loans, the Paycheck Protection Program loans, forgivable loans, have completely changed. And you're going to find out about all the major changes in today's episode. I'm Joshua Roberts, attorney at law, and you are watching Lawyer Up. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about the 4 major changes to the PPP, the Paycheck Protection Program, that was enacted by Congress at the close of 2020. And in looking at, and I'll have to read this, the Economic Aid to Hard-Hit Small Businesses, Nonprofits, and Venues Act. Easy for me to say, right? They should have come up with a cute name like CARES Act 2 or, hey, still cares. But they didn't. Nonetheless, there are 4 major changes that we're going to talk about today. The first one is that now there's a second draw available to small businesses. Number 2, there has been an expansion of allowable expenses under this program. Number 3 is that there is a brand new tax treatment to expenses under the program. And number 4, we have a simplified loan forgiveness process. Hey, if you enjoy the content of this channel, hit that like button. If you got something to say or a question, put it in the comment section below. If you want more information like this, then subscribe to the channel. And as always, I love it when you guys share me on social media. And remember, I am a lawyer, but I am not your lawyer. If you need legal advice specific to your legal situation, then you should lawyer up, or in the case of taxes, accountant up, with a professional in your area. So as an overview of the things we're going to be talking about today, the first topic we are going to address under the PPP laws and the changes thereto is that there is now a second draw that is available for the hardest hit businesses. These are businesses with less than 300 employees that basically took a financial hit in 2020 as compared to 2019. We're going to talk about the expansion of different types of business expenses that are now allowed under the PPP program. It's not just payroll costs anymore. The third topic we're going to hit is that the business expenses that are paid with PPP money are now tax deductible. If you recall, over the summer, the IRS said they would not be, but now they are. And last but not least, we're going to look at the forgiveness process, the simplified process for businesses that had a PPP loan of $150,000 or less. So the first topic is this second draw, or another round of PPP money for certain businesses. Now, the same basic rules apply as the first round of PPP money. You have to certify that there was an economic uncertainty that made that loan necessary to support your business's ongoing operation. You then calculate the average monthly payment that your business has for what are called payroll costs during 2019. Now, you can use the calendar year of 2019, or now that we're a year into the PPP program, you can look back at 2020's calendar year, the preceding 12 months, to come up with your payroll cost calculation. However, most people will get a higher number by looking at 2019 numbers. So from there, you calculate what loan amount you are eligible for. The average monthly payroll cost of your business is multiplied by 2.5 to generate your loan amount. Now, if you are a hotel or you are in the restaurant business, you now get a higher multiplier. You can multiply your average monthly payroll cost by 3.5. So that is a great benefit for businesses in what is really the hardest hit industry. Now, with the second draw, the cap, the maximum you can get is $2 million. Recall, under the first time it was $10 million, but now it's capped at $2 million. But there are additional regulations with the second draw for the PPP money. The first one is that you have to have 300 or fewer employees. So this is truly for those small businesses out there. The second requirement is that you have to have at least a 30% reduction in the gross receipts in a quarter of 2020 as compared to the same quarter of 2019. Now this may sound a little bit complicated, and the quarter that most people are going to want to look at is the April, May, and June. That is the second quarter, because that's when businesses were shut down. People were ordered to stay at home, and you look at your gross revenues for your business, you're most likely to have taken the largest hit in the second quarter. Now, if you can compare your gross receipts in the second quarter of 2020 to your gross receipts for your business in the second quarter of 2019, and there is at least a 30% reduction, then you qualify for the second draw of PPP money. Now, there are other considerations as well. The only businesses that qualify for a second draw are businesses that received a first draw. So you had to have gone through the process the first time and spent all that money by the time you receive the second draw. So if you still have PPP money and it won't be spent before you receive the second draw, you don't qualify. So if you're going to go through the second draw process, make sure you spend that money on qualified business expenses. Now, I mentioned that this is for truly small businesses, so publicly traded companies are excluded. Any political or lobbying type businesses are excluded. Any business that operates primarily overseas, excluded from this particular program. And of course, the last requirement is that this money must be spent on an approved category in order to be forgiven. So at least 60% of the money must be spent on payroll cost. And we talked about those in some of my earlier videos. Those are wages, benefits for employees, those types of things. Now the other 40% can be spent on other business expenses like rent, utilities, and mortgage interest. Now those were the approved areas under the original PPP program. But topic number 2 today is that area of expense has now expanded to include additional areas. It is now an approved usage of PPP money to pay operational expenses, and they classify these as payroll costs or back office support costs is how they've been classified. You can use PPP money for riot damage that was not covered by insurance. An interesting addition to the program. You can use PPP money for facility modifications that are related to safety. So if you added plexiglass shields to protect customers and employees, this is an allowed deductible expense under the program. Also, money for PPE, personal protective equipment. That is now an allowed business expense, a deductible expense under the program. And in the Act, Congress also clarified that in addition to healthcare benefits paid for employees, that the allowed expenses were meant to include group life, disability, vision, dental, and those types of employee benefit programs. After all, the Paycheck Protection Program was meant to protect jobs and to protect their paychecks. So now, in addition to just payroll costs, rent, utilities, and mortgage interest, all of those other areas are allowed as authorized expenses with PPP money. Number 3, and this is the big one, is the change in tax treatment. And I'm going to read to you a comment made in connection with the passage of the Act. It states, to undo a previous IRS interpretation, the Act provides that for any PPP loan, approved expenses are tax deductible in addition to being excluded from gross income. This applies to any present or future PPP loan, even if forgiveness has already been granted. Now, this is a big deal because we already were told that the PPP money was not going to be taxed as gross income. So you have your income for your business, you receive some PPP money on top of it. They already told us that that wasn't going to raise our taxable income. So we knew that. However, the IRS over the summer said we're not going to be able to use that PPP money for business expenses and take those deductions. However, with the second stimulus act being passed, they have clarified that and said, yes, you can also use PPP money to pay these types of business expenses that are legitimate business deductions that will further lower the taxable income for the business. So if you have a gross income for your business at this level, the PPP money would have sat on top of that, right? That's not taxable. And now we can add all of that PPP money for legitimate business expenses to further reduce the taxable income that comes into the business. This is a big deal for small businesses. And last but not least, there is a simplified loan forgiveness process for PPP loans that are less than $150,000. And I can tell you for these smaller loans, this is a big deal. I completed the long version over the summer for my business before we knew exactly what was going to be asked of each business. And it was a bit of a headache. It is several pages. It requires a bunch of supporting documentation. And it was going to be a lot for banks to review. So banks kind of lobbied Congress to say, hey, on these smaller loans, let's just let them sign a quick affidavit and get on down the road. So that is what Congress did. The simplified loan process is going to be a one-page document that you fill out. Now, on the document, you have to put the name of your business, of course, and your identifiers, but then you just list the amount of the loan loan proceeds spent on payroll costs, and remember that has to be at least 60% of the loan. Then you have to list the number of employees whose jobs were saved by this money. And hopefully you started the period with the same number of employees that you ended the period with, which is pretty much the purpose of the entire PPP loan process. The Paycheck Protection Program was to save jobs, right? Last but not least, you have to sign an attestation at the bottom of it that says that you have complied with the PPP requirements and that you're going to maintain records. So all you have to do is sign this document, file it with your bank. Now remember that the bank will file it with the SBA, and ultimately the government could audit you. So even though you have a simplified process, you should maintain records. Open up a file, throw all your relevant records, financial records regarding how you spent the PPP money in 2020 and 2021, and keep those records on file for at least 5 years in the unlikely event that you do get audited. So that's the episode. I would say that the PPP question was the most asked question of me through emails and text messages in all of 2020. So to recap, with the new legislation signed into law by President Trump at the end of 2020, we have 4 major changes to the PPP law. Number 1, there is now a second round of PPP money available to small businesses less than 300 employees that have had a significant impact, or at least 30% drop in gross receipts from a quarter of 2020 as compared to a quarter of 2019. Now, we also know that the allowed PPP expenses have expanded beyond just payroll costs. Number 3, we know that business expenses paid with PPP money are now tax deductible. Big news for small business. And last but not least, there was the simplified forgiveness process for small loans or PPP loans that are less than $150,000. So that's the episode. If you enjoyed it, hit that like button. If you have a question or a comment, put it in the comment section below. If you want additional information on this or similar topics, subscribe to the channel. And as always, I love it when you share me on social media. My name is Joshua Roberts, attorney at law, and you've been watching Lawyer Up.
Send lawyers, guns, and money. Dad, get me out of this.